Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Darnelle Melvin, and I'm the Special Collections and Archives Metadata Librarian at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Today, I want to take some time to briefly share with you our vision for metadata management as we build our future digital asset management system that supports semantic queries and visualization and other digital services and applications. I will also discuss some approaches we've implemented in anticipation of migrating our digital collections out of Content DM and into a Fedora repository. The reason why I'm sharing this with you all is to disseminate what we have and what we will learn with the greater cultural heritage community. So let's take a closer look. Metadata approaches. So as we built this new repository and supporting applications and services, we within our department, Digital Collections, and our division, Special Collections and Archives, have been investigating opportunities to, one, better reuse and repurpose our existing metadata, two, make our metadata more dynamic, and three, make our metadata more shareable and interoperable. Now, these three metadata approaches together are essential for not only large-scale digitization, but are also critical for transforming legacy metadata, as well as for the development of future applications. To give you a little background information, in 2014, the Digital Asset Management Task Force was charged with evaluating proprietary and open source repository solutions. And upon the conclusion of this review process, it was decided to implement Fedora 4 and Islandora Claw as the front end. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Fedora, I'll just take a quick moment to give a brief overview. Fedora stands for Flexible Extendable Digital Object Repository Architecture, and its development evolved out of a conference paper published in 1998 by Sandra Payette and Carlos Lagos. Fedora not only stores, but it preserves and provides access to our digital resources. It supports flexible and complex data models, such as the Portland Commons data model. It supports semantic relationships between resources using the resource description framework, and it supports millions of resources, large and small. It interoperates with other applications and services. Fedora is standard-based, and it's administered by DuraSpace. And most importantly, it's supported by an active community comprised of researchers, developers, libraries, archives, museums, and galleries. So Fedora supports two types of services. One are external components, which consume and act off repository messages. And two, the APIX integrations, which are web services wired in at the HTTP layer. External components integration leverages Apache Camel, and Camel is a middleware for integration with external systems. It can handle asynchronous, event-driven workflows. And then another external component is the Solr index. Solr is used to index the repository for search. And the other third piece that will be in this environment is the external triple store, which can be used to index the RDF triples of a Fedora resource. And as you see in this slide, so this is Fedora. And so what we have here is this image, page one image is, so page one is the container. So that would be a Fedora works. And within that container, you have the semantic relationship of this page one has a file, which is the page one JPEG. And as you see in the properties here, these are RDF statements. A file name, which is the object, well, actually the object is the page one JPEG, has a file name, which is its predicate. And then our object will be the string of that file name. And as you can see, these are all predicates. Our descriptive metadata will be one layer up at the container and then live there. Yep. So Islandora Claw, for those of you who don't know, is the newest generation of Islandora. Its application integrates Drupal 8 with the latest version of Solr and Fedora 4 and includes other modules and other microservices. The benefits for implementation of Claw includes its compatibility with Fedora 4, which speaks linked data, yay! Easy integration with Drupal. In our development shop, we are a PHP Drupal shop, so that's great. We're retaining our organizational knowledge and expertise, and it's being more interoperable with open source repositories. So like right now, we're in this really good period where as we're transitioning out of Content DM, you know, a lot of past decisions were made based off the limitations of the application itself. So we're now being able to decouple some of those Content DM specific limitations and literally being able to free up our metadata. So thinking about these three metadata approaches of reuse, how to make our metadata more dynamic, and how to make it more interoperable, this is a conceptualization of, I call our metadata ecosystem within the organization. So these 4 squares represent 4 different departments where metadata is actually being generated. And I'm over here in digital collections, but we're gonna start over here in special collections technical services. Because this is where, as we accession and process our archival materials, this is where the initial records are originally starting here. And from there, we have archive space. What they'll do is export out the MARC XML, load it into, goes down to cataloging, which they'll load it into connection, they'll enhance it, load it to WorldCat. From WorldCat, we'll load it into ALMA, the enhanced records. And then at the same time, we're also adding our inventories to a special collections database. Now, where I live in the world, in this ecosystem, is over here in digital collections. And with digital collections, we have multiple pathways of generating our metadata. We might have grant projects that are happening here. We might be reformatting whole segments of physical archival collections, so there's there. And so we're really needing a workflow that's dynamic. And this is what this yellow 2 directional arrows are representing. How can we reuse this stuff between, you know, they're doing this archival, great archival descriptions, but how can we incorporate that into our item level metadata? And vice versa, how can technical service repurpose our great granular item level metadata back into it? And we've been starting to do that, like incorporating archival resource keys for every object in the repository, also minting ARCs for our collections as well. And we'll go into a little bit of that, and I'll show you an example. So metadata in context. So as I first got to UNLV, I really wanted to look at what our metadata looks like within the local application and without the local, and outside of the local application. And as you see to our left, this was prior to me implementing a new metadata application profile. We have a lot of local fields defined. You see there's 44 local fields defined. Out of the 44 local fields, we have 23 of them that don't map to anything, which means it's not getting harvested. Out of the 23 fields not being mapped, 20 of them could have been mapped to a Dublin Core namespace or terms. And so what I tried to do is like simplify that. How can we make our metadata more simple for the people who are generating it? How can we really normalize the context, the local application, and how does it look like? Our metadata looks very different when you look at it within, say, Content DM, or look at the same record through the OAI PMH harvest. It's really, you lose a lot of granularity. So I wanted to normalize that. So perfect example, we have identified individuals and identified groups. If you peel back the layer of the application, what we're really are describing are subjects. But as you see, our identified individuals aren't mapping to a subject field. So I really want to simplify that, and so I collapsed that. So all subjects now, identified individuals, identified groups, are all going to the subjects fields. Another example would be master file creation equipment, or even master extent, not mapping. Extents could map to Dublin Core extent. So this is like some of the things that we've been doing to help this transition out of content DM. So, and this brings up interoperability. And what is semantic interoperability? Yes, we want our systems to talk to other systems, but not only, we want to go beyond just, does our systems talk to each other? The values of our metadata, do they mean the same things when it's coming out of one system, a legacy system going into the target system? And that's where a lot of the metadata mapping and transformation work really comes into play. You kind of lose that concept, especially if you go back, and as you see, we have elements where it's not mapping the stuff. So interoperability becomes very important in the migration process. Now, as far as metadata activities are concerned, hold on one second, get my notes. So in digital collections, we've been wrapping up a lot of activities around pretty much 4 key areas, including assessment, reconciliation, enhancement, and as well as user experience activities. So as far as the assessment stuff, like I showed you in the previous slide, doing a metadata environmental scan, just understanding the ecosystem and the workflows and how that is going to impact our work within our own departments and across our organizations. There's a lot of reconciliation activities, such as using an extract, transform, load process to migrate our legacy collections and getting them up to date to our new updated metadata application profile. I'm also doing work on names and subject authority reconciliation. Lucky for me, we've inherited really high quality metadata. So we're actually, my reconciliation, we're basically wrangling URIs off of exact matches. So the rate of hitting the exact match are very high. We're also doing metadata batch updates, sometimes via the catcher service, sometimes by pulling down the collections and remediating there. And then we're also updating our hyperlinks. So associated with our digital collections, we also have a lot of project sites that the links might need updating. And then lastly, we are doing date reconciliation. We started including date time coding, extended date time format encoding, and getting around uncertain dates, approximated dates, circa dates, those kind of things. As far as enhancement activities, we're starting to incorporate more geospatial enhancements, we're doing time period enhancements, and we're linking back out to the finding aid itself. And because of adding object archival resource keys to every object in a repository, those ARCs can be put back into the archive space records in the inventory. So they could find our stuff in our repository, and if a researcher needs more contextual information, they could link back out to the finding aid. And then, user experience stuff. How is our metadata being aggregated? How can we calibrate our collections for better OAI PMH harvesting? And how can we incorporate that into more social media outputs? And then on the 5th, we have some future development. So as you know, we're implementing Islandora Claw. We are also using this platform not only for a digital curation platform, but we're also using this Fedora stack for the future of our digital preservation program. Okay. So I'm going to give you a little example of some of these enhancement activities that are happening. This is a new collection bucket. Oh, and that's not linkable. So let me. I can't. Oh. Oh, cool. All right, so here goes our content DM for some of, this is our latest application profile. As you can see here, let's see if I can, okay. So here goes our collections with our collection identifiers, names, contributors, see our subjects, we've wrangled URIs, so now we can actually mix subject and name headings from various controlled vocabularies. We're also doing things like we're requiring every object in our repository to have a citation. And this is more about fostering an environment of data reuse and repurposing. If you give a researcher a citation, they will use it. So we're doing things like that. So now it's required, in our application profile, it is required that every object has the preferred citation, as you see. You have our archival collections here, where it comes from. You see our dates, and then we can, date period, so you'll be able to facet by temporal range. You can see, like I said, you could have, sorry about that. You could have multiple, you see we got fast headings here, mixed side by side maybe with TGM terms or any other control vocabulary, Another example is incorporating geoname URIs that are actionable. And so this is what I mean by how do we make our records more dynamic. As you see, we have our geoname URI, which is gonna pull up the map. Is a great way of making, oh no, did I close it? Oh no. So more dynamic, like I said, making our records more dynamic, incorporating the geospatial URIs. Also, we're incorporating standardized rights statements, as with the DPLA map is starting to require that stuff, and that's also actionable. And then we have our boilerplate special collections rights statement. And so this is like really exciting for me, is because we are now finally moving beyond just describing the resources in our repositories and describing the aboutness of our resource in these repositories. We're now taking a step further, and we're also describing the semantic relationships within and across our digital collections. And this is like really exciting for me. I could just nerd out on it, and I don't probably want to bore you with those finer points of, of that. So let me go back to the deck. Here's my contact information if you guys want to talk and nerd out on the finer points of linked data and metadata transformations. This is where you can find me. And if you guys have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Darnelle.
Thank you.
I'm sure we can find some people to nerd out metadata discussions in here. Just at least one or two people, right?
I hope so. I don't get to talk to too many people about this.
Any questions for Darnelle? Snickers bar. Every question. Anna.
So what's the scale of the metadata remediation that you're going to have to do? Because I know that you are sort of very lucky in coming from a place with very high quality records to start with. Does that make it easier to do some of the enhancements that you're working on with your new application profile?
Yeah, so. Okay, it's for the recording. So the remediation work is actually, it's like I said, it's kind of straightforward. I know a lot of people are dealing with partial hits on it, but like I said, we've been under our control of our subject headings and our names have been pretty good. So they're pretty much, like I said, they're direct matches on there. So I didn't have to do a lot of people use like the RDF extension and OpenRefine and some of those services to remediate. Because of the direct match nature, I didn't have to use and try to fumble, get the right version, open, refine, that's still working and everything. So I went back to old school style, building lookup tables and doing find and replace based off of just simple lookup tables. So I pretty much export out our names and our subjects, do a lookup table, and then we concatenate the URIs next to the string literals. And so that's pretty much it. And so once we get into the Fedora 4, which talks strictly RDF, we could go ahead and just drop all the strings and just have the URI. So a lot of that work right now is around wrangling URIs so we can have a store of all those URIs later. And then, you know, once we have all those URIs, you know, in the local context, like the work that you guys did with your local names authority, we could do the preferred names, display the preferred names in our local application, but it could still point to say a name authority in LC or VIAF or one of the other authorities and stuff. So it's really opening up a lot of like flexibility and how we, and it's really like changing the way that how we're really approaching metadata. It's so exciting. I love it.
And I think we've had an impact
Thank you.
on the rest of the metadata creators.
Wait.
I'll just mention that it's helped us with our migration, but now it's creeping into everyone's life because we're depending on other people's metadata that we want to reuse. And so now Special Collections Technical Services is working a lot on their name authorities and a lot on collection names and things like that because we're all becoming dependent upon each other. So I think there's no worry about there not being metadata cleanup to do. There will always be metadata.
Thank you. Any more questions for Darnelle? Okay, we will then move on to our next